Hey everybody, it's Tripl-L coming in with a Mushoku Tensei or Jobless Reincarnation video. This time specifically, I'm following up to the video about Rudy and his 3 possible wives. If you haven't seen that video, I recommend seeing it because that just gives you the biggest overview, whereas this is going to be the more detailed collection of highlights. And this time, this one's going to be revolving around Rudy and Eris, covering a good portion of their time together and the romance that occurred therein. This video will mostly reference the manga, going for some of the best moments that I picked out personally. By the end of this video, you'll know some of the cutest stuff and you'll have a good idea of the themes present in their romance. Do note the spoilers will be massive and I will mention the chapter numbers for some of the bigger stuff. Anyway, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoy. I hope you like Jobless Reincarnation and I hope you're ready to get spoiled. Okay, so the critical place to start when it comes to talking about Eris and Rudy's relationship is the promise that we saw depicted in season 1 of the anime. That being the time that Eris and Rudy made a promise for when they were 15 years old and what they were going to do. The reason this is important is because the first half of Eris and Rudy's relationship is about Rudy and Eris strengthening the relationship as they go up to the promised age, so that by the time the promised day comes, they will have gone through a lot and viewers can be like, oh yeah, you know what? I believe this is legit. So, if you saw season 1, you know that Rudy and Eris have been lobbed to a dangerous continent. On this continent, they want to make it back home. They're going on a journey to do so. It is on this journey that Eris and Rudy get a lot of moments that build their relationship further. By the end of this journey, Eris and Rudy will be super into each other and the viewer will know it. Though from Eris's side, she'll mention that she had loved Rudy from very early on. Anyway, with that, let's jump in properly to the highlights from this journey period. Some of it will have been covered in season 1, though the majority will be covered in season 2 most likely. And of course, everything can be read in the novels and the manga volumes. If you want to check out the material for yourself, I have linked to Amazon. You can buy either the manga or the light novels at your own discretion. Anyway, jumping into the highlights of Rudy and Eris for the journey portion. So first, critical moments from the anime were pretty much every moment that Eris tried to defend Rudy from Ruijerd and his criticisms. Obviously, powerful moment, especially considering that they were coming from Mad Dog Eris. And we know that Rudy himself is very committed to saving Eris, having a very pronounced arc about the things that he's willing to do for her sake. That's the stuff we got in the anime. Now we're going to move into the manga material. After the events of season 1 of the anime, Rudy, Ruijerd, and Eris are trying to get on a ship so that they can reach another continent and make their way home. They arrive at a certain seaside town and stuff happens, which leads to Rudy getting a new power. What this leads to is Eris's defeat at Rudy's hands. This moment features Eris speaking about how she thought that she needed to protect Rudy too. In this scene, her defeat at Rudy's hands shakes her and makes her lament having worked so hard to only have Rudy take her down so easily after being gifted a power. This was a moment about Eris's pride and her desire to want to protect Rudy hitting a bit of a speed bump. Ultimately, this was a moment where Eris got upset only because she cared about Rudy so much that she wanted to be able to protect Rudy, and Rudy pretty much made that desire hard to do with just the incredible power bump. Oh, but don't worry, they made up. Anyway, we move on from there. Beyond that, our party is trying to get on a ship so that they can go to the next continent. In doing so, Ruijerd and Rudy get involved with a smuggling operation, and in doing so, they score a free trip. Eris, however, is kept out of the loop for the majority of the details. So things go down, a lot of things happen, and the whole thing ends with Rudy in a different village having to recover. When he wakes up, he sees this. Eris is crying over him, looking worried. No, we have seen Eris cry before, but this was a very new sight. Eris crying over the possibility of losing Rudy. This scene, Eris talks more about how she was worried due to having been kept out of the loop. For this scene, it was very easy to understand why she was worried, because really, Rudy was her main support system, and that was in jeopardy of being lost, and this was a very powerful moment of vulnerability overall. The two reconcile with Rudy saying that he'll do better, and in the manga, we got this very pretty image. It was super cute, man. Eris was really touched by him saying that he'll do better next time. Moving on further, the next highlight is when Eris asks a temporary companion if he can teach her how to cook. It doesn't end well for her, but what's important to know is that she wanted to learn to cook for Rudy's sake, and she was kind of dissuaded when she had to consider the possibility that that might not make Rudy happy. So the big thing to take away here is that she was very concerned about Rudy's feelings at this point. Around chapter 35, Rudy has a pretty big crisis when he runs into a certain someone that ultimately leaves him pretty depressed. Q Eris stepping in strong, hugging Rudy and telling him something nice when he was telling her to just go away. How can you look at this and not think it's cute? It was super cute, super adorable. Really enjoyed it. 10 out of 10. Anyway, another cute moment is also here. Eris was squirming beneath Rudy's appreciation. This was really cute too. Anyway, we're going to skip a bunch of chapters that didn't really cover much Eris and Rudy, and we're going to approach a critical moment. In chapter 47, Rudy gets into so much trouble that he is on death's door and Eris freaks out. As would be expected. He had a hole in his chest. This is where a lot of Eris's previous stuff, especially how she feels about protecting Rudy, starts to come back and starts to interact with this very big source of trauma. So when you look at it, the possible death acts as a giant catalyst. It's pretty relevant for the things that happen later. We go to chapter 48 of the manga and Eris is freaking out. In this chapter we find out that Eris, that proud child, got on her knees to beg for Rudy to be saved. I'm not sure if you've noticed, but a theme that Eris's expressions of love are centered around are the idea that she sacrifices her pride for Rudy's sake. The writer gets a lot of mileage from having Eris do things that she would not usually do based on the Eris that you understood, especially when you watch the anime. You can obviously tell why that makes more of an impact with her regards for her feelings for Rudy, because the rhetoric is, oh, you see a different side of Eris specifically when she's worried about Rudy. Anyway, Rudy is saved and he wakes up to Eris watching over him. Eris is so relieved that she kisses him. It's Rudy's first kiss and he has a massive nosebleed in response. Super cute moment, 9 out of 10. Anyway, Eris finally gets some rest, falling asleep once she knows that Rudy is alright, and we move to chapter 49's content. In chapter 49, we see that Eris has become very attached to Rudy as they complete the last leg of their journey. It's super cute. This chapter, however, does something really big. It shows that Rudy wants to develop ways to deal with the person that almost killed him. This ends up terrifying Eris and shakes her very deeply, influencing future events. From Eris's perspective at this point, she failed at protecting Rudy, who was already very strong, and now when she's the one that's breaking down, just happy that Rudy is alive, Rudy's looking to the future, and this causes Eris to go quiet for now, but this was a very critical moment for later. Keep in mind that at this point, Eris sees Rudy as someone incredible, and the mechanism here is that she sees him incredible because while she's shaking in fear of the person that killed Rudy, or almost killed Rudy, this kid is thinking about how to counter him. That leaves her in a very tough spot. Next, highlights occur in chapter 50, the chapter where Eris finds out about what happened to her family members. We also find out about the political scheming that's going on in the background involving a perverted noble wanting to claim Eris as a concubine. Eris and Rudy receive all the news together, with Eris holding on to Rudy's hand, showing that she did not want to receive this news without Rudy. Once this news has been delivered, Eris asks to be left alone, telling even Rudy to leave her alone for a bit because ultimately she just wants to grieve, and she of course puts up a brave front. Rudy, however, complies. The next time that Rudy sees her is later in the night when she comes to his room in sleepwear, telling him that she wants a family. Chapter 51 is where it all heats up and a lot of things happen. I'm going to tell you a point-by-point retelling of what went down just because chapter 51 has a lot of information. So Rudy finds out he forgot Eris's birthday. She is now 15. Eris tells him she wants to sleep with him. Rudy rationalizes that Eris is just coming to him as a sort of response to the loss of her family that they had just previously learned about. Rudy tries to scare Eris off by telling her he feels perverted and might do things to her. Eris says she's fine with that for the night. Eris tells Rudy that she's 15, so the promise is valid. I told you that was important. Rudy further rationalizes that he's just taking advantage of Eris's weaknesses. When Eris sees Rudy hesitating, she wonders if she's not good enough. Rudy tells her exactly what she means to him in response, slipping in that he wants to confirm their love for each other after they've calmed down. Saying love catches Rudy off guard because then he has to wonder, wait, do I actually love Eris? And this leads to another round of Eris asking if it's still not okay for them to be together, all things considered, after which Rudy just shuts up and accepts her. It all goes down. Eris says this thing her mother taught her. It is in fact very embarrassing, and they have a nice night. But while Rudy is monologuing that he wants to start a family with Eris, and he speaks about how there's only happiness ahead, this face happens. Okay, so before we move on, I just need to make sure you value some of the little things that happen in chapter 51, because it's kind of hard to value it when we have to go through point format. The writer took a long time to properly indicate that the optics here were very sketchy. They worked through the whole issue of the vulnerability, and the reason they did that was to make sure that they showed that Rudy was giving this a lot of thought. The intended read being, Eris isn't doing this out of grief only, she legitimately loves Rudy and is at worst taking advantage of the situation. Giving Rudy this many lines where he rationalizes also makes Rudy seem more responsible, which is very important because it is really driven home that Rudy is an old man in a young man's body. That's why they had to really hammer home the vulnerability aspect. Ultimately though, this is a situation that was written to convey that even in a moment surrounded by tragedy, there was still happiness that could be found. Secondly, this encounter once again showed Eris's inferiority complex, which was building throughout the earlier moments, which is very important for the next bit. Eris in the manga twice questioned her worth. This whole issue of her self-perceived worth was extremely prevalent throughout this arc, not just in the romance stuff with Rudy, but also in her conversations with Ruijerd. This sequence was consistent with quite a bit of the narrative that came before it, and I would say that's why this sequence is pretty good. It was also relatively good at catching some of the raw feelings and depicting, again, the murky areas of a romance born during tragedy, or in this case, strengthened during tragedy. Now we move on. Rudy is happy. He's having a great day after his night with Eris. He turns though and he finds that the bed is empty and Eris's hair is everywhere on the floor on the bed, and there is a note. Here is the note. Right now we're not a good match for each other. I'm leaving on a journey. Eris. There you go. Eris has left at this moment in time. Now, after this point, Rudy becomes incredibly depressed, thinking that Eris left him because he wasn't good enough, which leaves him with erectile dysfunction. One brought about because severe heartbreak. Because of this erectile dysfunction, Rudy ends up going to a magic university, or I guess I should say, Rudy ends up seizing the opportunity to go to a magic university where he would later reunite with Sylphie. But that is a story for another day. Right now we need to talk about Eris. Chapter 52 covers Eris's side of the story. The girl did not think that she was going to screw Rudy up the way she did. Ghislaine did try to talk to her, to get her to talk to him like a normal person, but the only person that Eris compromises on her character flaws for is Rudius. Ghislaine really had no chance. Eris was too set in her thinking that her way was right, and she was also still traumatized, so that motivated some of her ill-advised actions. Anyway, Eris gives the reader a full rundown of her thoughts. In the novel, this was presented as an entire chapter just to Eris. Here is why I mentioned the stuff at the beginning. At this stage, the writer was telling the readers of how he had constructed this. When you're reading Eris's monologue, the reader is supposed to be thinking, or is supposed to be able to think, yeah, you know what? I saw that thing that Eris is referencing. Yes, I saw the moments that Eris was talking about. This portion was like the big reveal, where a good chunk of Eris's behaviors were accounted for. So, in this portion, she says she loved Rudy since they were young, and that love only grew stronger after teleportation, referencing the time that they were dancing together. Continuing, Eris talks about how Rudius was amazing, how she knew he was pushing himself for her sake. In turn, Eris tried not to be a bother. She also spoke about how she was training as hard as she could to be able to protect him, referencing some of the dialogue from the Eris's defeat at Rudy's hand scene. Then she talks about the day that Rudy almost died. She talks about how Rudy only got saved by what was essentially a lucky break, and how she ultimately ended up being a bother. She spoke of how when her and Rudy returned home, she pretty much had nothing other than Rudy. She spoke of how she panicked. She thought of how it was likely that Rudy was going to leave to go find his mother and his other family and leave her behind. She admits that she tried to seduce him into staying with her. She notes that when he accepted, she was very happy, but then I believe during the act she realized that Rudy was younger than her, coming to a interesting realization. and she came to the conclusion that she had just been taking advantage of him. She didn't like what she did. She had to change. That's why she cut her hair. The most anime way of saying that she was going to make a change and start fresh. She says also that the reason that she isn't suitable for him is because she's too dependent on him. For the record, we see this rhetoric a lot in anime. What you have to understand here is that what she's saying is that she wants to be able to stand next to Rudy as opposed to being protected by Rudy. She wants to be of help. So she ultimately says that it's because she loves Rudy that she needs to distance herself. Okay, so up to here, this is just Eris telling you how she views herself and how she uses that view to make sense of her actions. She wants to avoid overdependence on Rudy. Keep that in mind, because this is not the first time that Rudy has been separated from a girl, with overdependence being the reason. Anyway, Eris decides that she'll leave with Ghislaine to train so that she can one day become stronger than the guy that almost killed Rudy. A noble goal, in all honesty. Before leaving, she wants to tell Rudy goodbye, but she's afraid that Rudy would stop her, citing that he is very good with words. This is actually a line that we've heard before, but more on that later. Anyway, Eris decides to write a letter and decides to make it short so that Rudy won't follow her. Hint, this is why the letter is so short. She ends off by saying that Rudy is smart, so he'll figure it out. This is one of the most tragic lines of thinking, and it's also the most critical. Eris didn't think that what she did was going to affect him the way it did. In fact, she thought that he was so smart he'd understand everything. Which ironically, in this case, it again just shows you how biased she was into believing that Rudy was so amazing. And this is ultimately something that people don't appreciate. Eris is socially awkward and borderline socially stupid. And I do want to really hammer home socially. Couple that with an inferiority complex that involves Rudy, and you're not going to get a good situation. The narrative itself questions Eris's actions through Ghislaine's commentary, but this ultimately was consistent with Jobless Reincarnation's themes of people with stubborn negative traits, letting those negative traits muck things up. And in this case, Rudy was really messed up as a result of Eris's particular negative traits. Now, going back to something that I mentioned earlier, Eris's departure was reminiscent to Sylphie's situation in that it revolved around the same idea of overdependence, just in this case, it was looked at from a different angle. For instance, when it came to Sylphie, Paul separated Rudy from Sylphie because he could see that the girl was going to grow up unable to live without Rudy. Paul was right. The narrative says Paul was right. Rudy even admits that he was raising her into being a wonderfully submissive girl. In this case, Eris was the Paul, and in this case, Eris made the choice for herself. Similarly, Paul was the first person to not want to deal with letting Rudy speak from fear of Rudy's manipulation tactics. He too decided to knock Rudy out and leave him with a letter. In Eris's case, Eris again decides for herself that she doesn't want to deal with Rudy's manipulation tactics and risk him changing her mind, and she takes advantage of the moment when Rudy's unconscious to leave and leaves him with a letter. Though arguably she probably did all of this in a nicer way than Paul did. All in all, you can see that Eris, interestingly, was similar to Paul, essentially providing the same conclusions that Paul had reached earlier when it came to Rudy and his relationship. If you wanted to draw more comparisons, you could say a small part of Eris was a more self-aware Sylphie in regards to the dependency angle. What you should take away from this, though, was that there was a very slight reuse of previous elements. This case, it just being reused elements looked at from another perspective, and that in of itself is interesting because Jobless Reincarnation does like to reuse narrative elements, usually giving them a new spin as it continues developing the characters. Anyway, all you have to know is that because of the fear of overdependence, a girl has once again been separated from Rudy, and funnily enough, just like in the first situation, Ghislaine is a central piece as to how the separation can occur. She facilitates the separation. That might be the best way to say it. Anyway, guys, there is still more to Eris's story, but this video is too long. I'm not sure how long it'll take to edit. This part covers the very critical first part. The other reason I'm going to break it here is because we don't have manga material for the second part of Eris and Rudy's romance, so I'll be taking some time to figure out how to be creative with presenting the info, so hold on tight. If there's any topic you want me to summarize for you, though, let me know in the comments down below. If for some reason you want spoilers for what happened to Rudy and Eris's families, along with some light analysis of those situations, let me know in the comments below with family fates. I'll be able to see that really easily, and I'll know that's what people are interested in. Just spam that comment if you want that. The material for that is in the manga, so it'll be easier to just tell you guys about it and summarize. And there's also a few little interesting tidbits in there. Anyway, everyone, that is it for this first video covering the romances of Rudy. I hope you enjoyed. Let me know what you thought down below. Like and share, that does help. And until next time, I hope you have an absolutely great day.